Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Perfect Building Maintenance, New York Community Bank, All Nation Renovation, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Greenberg Traurig, LLP. Additional funding has been provided by grants from AVR Realty Company, LLC, Beechwood Organization, Briarwood Organization, Capital One Bank, C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman and Wakefield, the Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Stephen Napolitano, First American Title Insurance Company, Friedman, LLP, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, LLC, Genova, Burns and Gian Tomasi, Grubb and Ellis, Investors Savings Bank, Jack Jaffa and Associates Real Estate Consultants, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Madison Realty Capital, Markham LLP, Marcus Millichap Real Estate Investment Services, Margolin Weiner and Evans LLP, Massey Knackle Realty Services, M&T Bank, Meridian Capital Group, Moynihan Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Orphanides and Associates, Sterling and Sterling, Urban American, the Wickoff Group.
Flushing, the place where you have Citi Field. Flushing, where you have all these dialects. Flushing, a place where I remember where you had kosher delicatessens. What's happening today in Flushing, Willets Point, Corona? I don't know, but I brought together the people who know, live, operate, and see what's happening in Flushing. My guests today include Claire Schulman, the president of the Willets Point, Flushing, Corona, LDC. Vincent Rizzo, the principal at the Briarwood Organization. Michael Meyer, president of F&T Group. And last, never least, Joseph Ficalora, the chairman, the president, the CEO, and born in Flushing of New York Community Bank Corp. You weren't born in Flushing, you were born in Corona.
Right.
So you were born in Corona, and Mr. Rizzo was born in Corona.
Correct.
So, you know.
And we shared the same doctor. We shared the same doctor, but my family being much richer than Joe's family, we saw the doctor much later in life.
You saw the doctor much later in life. Okay, I didn't realize that. So since you've taken the lead in the opening comments, what do you see happening today? You know, we have this new field which is open for the last 2 years. We have all of this development. You know, you have Skyview Park. You've been approved, which we'll talk about that in a second. Why do you, who've been in the Flushing Willets Point area for all these years, why do you want to develop in Willets Point today? And what do you plan to develop?
Willets Point has been an area waiting to be discovered. It has been the dumps forever. It's the car lots, and junk lots, and it will afford Queens an area for both housing and business unparalleled. And it will add to Flushing's stature in the world.
Now, hasn't Flushing's stature in the world increased? I mean, how many years have you been involved with development in Flushing?
Well, I joined F&T Group back in 2003, but I actually became familiar with Flushing through when I was at Tishman, and we were hired by Mr. Ficalora, then at the Queens Savings Bank, and had a development parcel right on Main Street, which is now Queens.
But let's talk about that. I mean, you know, in many parts of the city, we've had these places lie fallow for years. Nothing happened to them. I mean, right now we have the situation in Coney Island, but look what happened in Williamsburg, and look what's happening. And there's been the revitalization. I mean, we were a little older than you, perhaps, and we remember when Flushing, there was nothing going on. You know, there were great things, and then the 80s came, and there was really quietness. Nothing really happened. So let's talk about that development. Let's talk about what you're doing, what you just finally got approved after 5 years.
Well, Our group, in conjunction with the Rockefeller Development Group, was awarded the Flushing Commons, the municipal Lot 1 redevelopment contract. And our project, Flushing Commons, after 5 years, finally got entitled about a week ago. And we hope to begin construction with financing in the next year or so. But I think that, to go to your question about really what's happened, the phenomenon of Flushing, I gave a lot of speeches about Flushing Commons, and I really think it's related to the immigrant phenomenon. Flushing is known worldwide. It is, as I say in many speeches, it is the most ethnically diverse community in the entire nation. Queens is in general, so either Jackson Heights or Flushing. And that immigrant vitality you have first started in the Koreans in the 80s, or even before that, Taiwanese, Koreans, Chinese, Vietnamese. So that's been a major factor. More recently, with Mayor Bloomberg's election, the community elders and leaders went to Bloomberg and said, we need we need a focus for the redevelopment of Flushing, because it's thriving, but it's really blighted and there's infrastructure issues. So they came up with a downtown Flushing framework, working with the community over about 1.5 years. And it called for some major initiatives, one being the municipal lot redevelopment, number one, the public parking lot there. The second being Willets Point. The third, traffic mitigation things like expanding the sidewalks, changing the direction of traffic on Main Street, and so forth. So that's taken many, many years, but it's from that, that was really the inception. And then that's what's given fuel to that initiative has been Claire, former borough president, taking on the LDC, organizing political and commercial leaders to really get the attention of not just city governments, but state and so forth, to correct a lot of the problems. Long Island Railroad, the parcel along College Point Boulevard, which is so blighted, which will severely, deleteriously impact Willets Point if that's not cleaned up on the other side of the river as well.
Claire? As Michael said, you are the borough president. You've been involved with Flushing, even though you're a Brooklyn person like myself. So we won't hold, that's the good part, with the exception of these two gentlemen over here. So, you've seen all this situation. What is the hope of the LDC today to do in that development?
Well, first of all, we would like to redesign the east side of the Flushing River, because we feel it has to be compatible with what happens in Willets Point. Remember when I was borough president, Flushing was not doing well. And then the Asians came in and really revived downtown Flushing. I was lucky enough to build that beautiful Flushing Library, which has the largest circulation of any branch library in the country. We also redid the number 7 train, and we rebuilt the Flushing Town Hall. We were starting to redo downtown Flushing because it had such marvelous opportunities, because the population was growing and was so exciting. As Michael said, the chemistry in Flushing was incredible. Also, we've been working on College Point Boulevard because it's a disaster. You can't cross the street. So the construction and the rehabilitation of College Point Boulevard will begin in the next couple of months. And we were able to put medians down College Point Boulevard that will be interrupted so fire trucks can get around. But people will be able to cross the street. It will beautify College Point Boulevard, which is a horror. And the Parks Department has agreed to put trees on the sidewalks. So that project will start shortly. It will start up at 32nd Avenue and move down to Fowler, which is quite a distance. So, I am very optimistic about the future of Flushing. I think it's a major part of the city of New York, and I think it requires a lot of attention, and I think it's all doable. And remember, too, that the mayor included downtown Flushing and Willets Point in his 2030 plan. And I think he's very serious about Willets Point. In spite of the lawsuits that are current, I believe Willets Point will move forward.
Joe, you've been there, as I said, since you grew up, and your first job was with the bank,
Sure.
Queens County Savings. So, and you are the bank of the community, and I'd say you are the community bank of Queens in general. How do you, as a banker, look at the development and the opportunities in the Flushing, Willets Point, Corona market?
I think there's no question that that particular environment will in fact provide for significant new development. The combination of the project that you're working on, as well as what's possible at Willets Point, is going to provide millions of square feet of new usable space tied into an existing, that is the terminus for the number 7 line. All of the buses from Queens come into the downtown Flushing area. You have the City Field, and you have the tennis stadium, and you have all of the other facilities within the very lovely park, which is the World's Fairs twice. The World's Fair at 39 and 64 was immediately adjacent to all of this area that we're talking about. So the ability to develop this area with the Long Island Railroad, the number 7 line, all of the buses, and all of the roadways that are there, which is immediately adjacent to a waterway, which is immediately adjacent to LaGuardia Airport. High-speed ferries into that downtown area would in fact greatly enhance the utilization of all of the new buildings that are going to be built, tying them directly into Manhattan or to Long Island or to other places. So the reality is there's a tremendous opportunity in that immediate area because you have major roadways, you have major railroads, both the number 7 line and the Long Island Railroad. You have immediate access to the airport, and you have immediate access to the waterways.
And bus lines, too. It's the biggest bus hub.
The bus lines are literally the ones that serve all of Queens, and they actually tie into the Bronx and into Brooklyn as well. So it is a hub, and the development of this all new is going to be very, very successful. So it's not as though you're developing too many square feet. This is the city of New York, and this is probably going to be the largest ultimate development of Queens.
To that point, in our EIS studies, when we're doing for Flushing Commons, which Roosevelt and Main, the intersection, the end of the number 7 line, one of the busiest lines in the subway system, it's the 3rd busiest pedestrian intersection in all of New York. Yeah. Following Times Square and I think Herald Square, and then comes Main Street in Flushing. So as Joe's saying, it's extraordinarily, it's thriving, it's dynamic. Economically, it has.
So when you do the development, what is your plans? What are the products? What are you going to be building? You're going to be building housing. You're going to be building hospitality. You're going to be building office. You're going to be rebuilding a parking lot.
Yeah, we will. It's a mixed-use project. It's about 1.8 million square feet in total. It will have about 2/3 of a million square feet will be condominium housing. About 250,000 square feet retail. We'll have commercial building that will either be office like our current Queens Crossing next door, or it will be a hotel or some combination, and we'll sit atop 1,600 space parking garage that's 3 levels below.
You talk about condominiums, but I know something that Claire has worked on and what Vinny has done and what Joe has financed over the years and what we need in the city is really affordable housing.
Well, when the city EDC, when they put out the RFP on this, they included there's an existing AME church on the present municipal lot, and they have a parcel that they have as part of their project that will be affordable housing. So the 2 projects were conceived of as a package. So you have affordable housing that the AME church is going to develop, and then you have the Flushing Commons, which I just described.
Vinny, you've been involved in a leader in affordable housing. In your plan to do as one of the developers in Willets Point, what do you plan to do? What kind of projects?
Well, our specialty of late has been affordable housing, and we are looking at a nice percentage of the apartments to be available for people of median income. And we hope to put at least 10% affordable housing into the first phase, and that will be increased as the phases move along.
Now, besides, so in your first phase, you say 10% is affordable, 90% is market rate housing?
Yes.
And what about any other developments? Because Michael, prior to the show, was talking about there was once an idea of a convention center. I mean, because you do have the stadium, and the stadium could have access to a convention center. I mean, because the Javits Center is one place, but the city of New York could definitely afford another convention facility. Do you see that as a potential, Claire, or anyone on that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah,
I think that it should be included in the first phase at Willets Point. It is not currently. I believe it should be put into the first phase because of the proximity of LaGuardia Airport. It's a natural. I think it would do very well, and there are a lot of combinations that can make a convention center doable.
In an effort put together by the Queen's Chamber, their study suggested a hotel, a convention center, and housing for that proximity because of all of the ways in which people can get there.
Remember that Willets Point is sitting between two major airports.
Right.
It's an incredible site.
And
Yeah.
the first phase will have, in addition to housing, of course, it will have offices and retail, ground floor retail.
And a school and a park.
Now, I mean, Michael was talking about a portion of his property having retail. One of the biggest problems of New York is that we have a lack of urban retail, good urban retail. I mean, in the borough of Queens, since you've been prior borough president, Queens Plaza, the volume of the shopping areas in Queens do great. I mean, because there's foot traffic as opposed to people, I happen to go to the newly completed, where Costco is. People walk to Costco. Normally, you don't see people walking to Costco. They walk to Costco, they walk to Kohl's. Over here, the same thing in Flushing. People go there. We need more retail, and I think Willets Point could afford to have more retail over there. Another interesting thing, and it's partially happened, and I don't want to consider Flushing the same situation as Newark, is when they built the Prudential Center in downtown Newark. The biggest problem that they had over there was any restaurants. Now, you have the situation right now. You go to Citi Field, which is a beautiful facility. It has a totally different feeling than going to Yankee Stadium. It's more of a personalized, warmer feeling, but there's nothing there. I mean, you can't go to eat. You take the train.
Yeah, but you can actually walk right over to downtown Flushing, which has hundreds of Korean and Chinese restaurants.
But I think part of that maybe is something that the Flushing, even though it's the LDC, maybe that's not really perceived because the people go to
People
Citi
don't
Field.
realize it yet.
I'm the vice chairman of the BID, and that's one of our initiatives to market to create greater awareness of Flushing because it has historic significance, as Claire explained. It's culturally vital. It is a huge eatery, some of the great restaurant and cuisines from around the world. And foodies do actually come to Flushing. We have to get the word out. And that's why, to your point, though, about Willets Point, what's critical, I think, in making this work for the merchants in Flushing is to have really linkage or integration between Willets Point on one side of the river and downtown Flushing on the other. And we talked before that one of the things that came out as an idea in the initial downtown framework was to create a pedestrian bridge to really to create that interwoven urban experience.
Now, how do you...
I'm sorry, Flushing is big. Most people don't realize it. To your point about eateries, Flushing is bigger than Chinatown.
Yeah, right.
Population, eateries, and so forth. It's the principal area now for Chinese.
What about
Americans.
Corona? Since I have the two kids who were born in Corona.
It's right there. It's in immediate proximity.
Both Flushing and Corona will generate income for their residents. Both will be, I think, wonderfully treated. Don't forget, you talked about restaurants. Once the housing and businesses go into the Willets Point area, they will generate restaurants of their own too.
Right.
An interesting subject that Joe brought up before is that the 1939 and the 1964 World's Fair. I wasn't around for the 1939 one, but I do remember being at the 1964 World's Fair. And, that was a beautiful facility. It was a great thing. And unfortunately, what is left from that is basically nothing.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
No. I mean, with regard to, no, there's not as much. I mean, it was such a large place. Can't you take some of the facilities, okay, some of the additional land and reuse that for a convention center or something like that?
First of all, Flushing Meadow Corona Park is about 1,250 acres. In it is the New York Hall of Science,
Right.
the Queen's Theater,
Right, which came
the
out of-
zoo,
The museum.
City Field, the Queen's Museum of Art,
USTA.
the USTA. I mean, we are,
Can-
we have invested
Okay,
hundreds of millions
I
of
agree.
dollars in redoing Flushing Meadow.
Can we redo it? Can we do some more work over there?
Like what? I mean, you know,
Well, federal money is always good to have, but the park is a beautiful park.
it's very, very difficult to use parkland for anything other than parks and recreation. You have to go to the
Yeah.
state legislature.
You-
You have to have a switch. To put a convention center in Flushing Meadow Park would be a very difficult
not
thing to
necessary.
do, and
It's
why
not
wouldn't we
necessary.
do
You
it
got
in
Willets
Willets
Point.
Point?
Willets Point
Sure.
is the perfect location.
Right.
We were the initial champions to the city of a convention center, building on, as Joe said, the chamber report of years ago. It's the perfect location because of the hub, and right next to that rail line, the 7 and the Long Island Railroad and the airports. That is the perfect spot.
Think about Central Park South. Realize that any big buildings you build there will have views of a beautiful park, will have views of the airport, of the water. I mean, you're not talking about a place where people would not want to live. You're talking about a place that's actually a hub that would make it very attractive.
What
for living.
about, in the same manner that in Nassau Coliseum, where there's a question, what about a Coliseum?
In Flushing Meadow Park?
No, in
Willets
Willets
Point.
Point. I mean, there's a situation because you know, in many cities around the country, you have a stadium and then you have an exhibition hall where you can have a team. You know, in Brooklyn right now, eventually there's going to be the Nets. In Newark, you know, in Newark there happens to be a small minor league baseball field for the Newark Bears and the Prudential Center. Do you see, because of the space of what you have available in Willets Point, perhaps a major league team or a minor league team coming there?
I mean,
I-
other than the existing Mets?
Right. I'm talking about a basketball team, or I'm talking about a
Oh.
hockey team,
Oh.
something in that side.
Well, conceivable.
I think it's a great
Certainly
location for
conceivable.
it.
Yeah.
So if you had as a banker, how do you take what's going on in Flushing, and part of the problem is that development takes many years. How do you look at this, and how are you going to lend to people who want to build in Flushing?
You know, when you think about all of the attributes of this particular proximity, and we're talking about already approved major developments, it's a great place to lend because you have all of this new development in proximity to travel. You have waterways, you have railroads, you have the airport. I mean, it's a great, great location to put money so as to develop retail sites or other type living facilities. I mean, again, when I talk about Central Park, living right adjacent to a park, because that's what you are. Much of what is Willets Point is adjacent to a waterway and a park, as well as downtown Flushing, as well as all of the necessary transportation, whether it be vehicle or bus or it be train.
I have a question, you know, and Claire was saying before about the Long Island Railroad, which I want to bring up over here. In certain cities, I know this specifically in Boston, Washington, and Chicago, you have access by the subway, direct access by the subway to the city. I don't believe you truly have that today at LaGuardia, direct access of that situation.
Well, you have the subway and the Long Island Railroad that stops right adjacent to Citi Field, right in Willets Point.
But that's all I'm saying to you is you have the situation, and the nicest things, and you know, fortunately, due to the economy getting better and everything, they project about 47.5 million visitors to New York this year. It's going up there. Hotel business is getting better. It's even helping Queens because you know there are a lot of new hotels. But we don't have that access right now as a direct link.
Well, let me tell you,
Yeah.
we did get $600 million to link LaGuardia to Manhattan. And the controversy over the route was so terrible
Right.
And I had kept that money for a long time because the MTA set it aside for that purpose. And we never could get it off the ground because there was so much controversy about where would that rail go. We had a route that was an extension of an unused subway. But if you went down 31st Avenue, everybody living on, or 31st Street, everybody living there had a fit. And then they suggested, let's put it around the waterfront. Nobody's going to put a train around the waterfront. And that's what happened. Then eventually the MTA took the money and put it somewhere else.
Yeah.
But that's the problem in doing that.
Claire, you were successful in getting the train to the plane. That was for JFK.
I wanted that to go to Manhattan.
Right.
And so the tracks are not compatible.
Right.
But I am told that it's a very easy job to redo the tracks.
The train to the plane has done very well. People are very, very happy about it, even though they thought it would be originally not that successful.
It's
a great access. It helps New York City and helps people come into the city. And, I'm just bringing out the situation. So, it takes many years. In a quick idea, are we talking the mayor? You mentioned before the mayor's plan for 2030. When do we see Willets Point ready? In the next 10 years, 15 years?
The entire thing, the city wants to separate it into thirds. The first phase being on 126th Street from Northern to Roosevelt. And so I think we ought to get that off the ground before we can predict what will happen. Remember that the pollution in Willets Point is a factor. That has to be cleaned up. And they have a plan to do that. But I can't really speculate on how long will it take to do the entire 62 acres. I have no idea. However, speaking to the city yesterday, they think that current lawsuits may last another 3 or 4 months, at which time they will issue an RFP, which I believe would be somewhere in the late winter of 2011.
I wish I had more time to discuss it, but we've gone through 30 minutes. So later in the year, I promise, especially maybe there'll be some new developments. You can tell us what you're doing and your activity. I'd like to thank the 4 gurus of Flushing, Willets Point, and Corona, the kids who grew up there too, for being here. I'd like to thank Claire Schulman, Vinnie Rizzo, Michael Meyer, and Joe Ficalora. See you next week.
Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Perfect Building Maintenance, New York Community Bank, All Nation Renovation, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Greenberg Traurig, LLP. Additional funding has been provided by grants from AVR Realty Company, LLC, Beechwood Organization, Briarwood Organization, Capital One Bank, C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman and Wakefield, the Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Stephen Napolitano, First American Title Insurance Company, Friedman, LLP, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, LLC, Genova, Burns and Gian Tomasi, Grubb and Ellis, Investors Savings Bank, Jack Jaffa and Associates Real Estate Consultants, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Madison Realty Capital, Markham LLP, Marcus Millichap Real Estate Investment Services, Margolin Weiner and Evans LLP, Massey Knackle Realty Services, M&T Bank, Meridian Capital Group, Moynihan Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Orphanides and Associates, Sterling and Sterling, Urban American, the Wickoff Group.